Well, who would have thought that I would be correct once again? Who would have thought that I would get proven right? That once again, people who use the left and use progressive ideology as a shield to will oftentimes engage in abusive behavior. Who could have predicted this? Who could have done it? Who could have seen this coming? Who could have called something like this? Who? In reality, this should not be a big shocker to you. Caleb Maupin, well-known tanky figure who one time wrote a burn book that I believe mentioned me at one point. It was like about all of BreadTube. I think it might have mentioned me by name at one point. But when I covered the book, Caleb Maupin came into the chat himself, and it was him, to scream and about my coverage of the book. So that was pretty funny. We literally I include in the video where I review the bits in his book, his ranting in my chat live as I'm reviewing it. And there's nothing like reviewing a book while the person who wrote it is screaming and angry live in your chat. And everybody's making fun of them. Everybody in the chat was making fun of them. It was honestly glorious. Seriously, if you wanna just absorb some Caleb Maupin molding, go watch that video. It's very, very good. Anyway, that was one of the first videos I ever edited for you, Lamau. Yeah, it was, Cherry. Anyway, Caleb Maupin, tanky, Russian asset, many things I could call him. However, a new label has been applied to our boy, and that is abuser. Caleb Maupin has been accused of being an abuser. In this Medium article, some CPI, which is the name of apparently Caleb Maupin's, Caleb Maupin has a cult, and we're going to get into that in a little bit later. But yeah, a lot of this is coming from people that were in his cult. Now, to be clear, a lot of the people that are levying these accusations themselves are Nazbuls and tankies and whatnot. I don't necessarily have love in my heart for the political beliefs of many of the accusers in this case, but that does not mean that their accusations of abuse should not be taken seriously as any other accusation would be. I'd hope that you guys take accusations seriously. That's what I've advocated for consistently on my channel, taking them seriously. That doesn't mean believing them outright. It means exactly that, taking them seriously. And that's what we're going to be doing today. Now, apparently the evidence is pretty strong against Maupin here, but you better believe we're going to be giving it a good listen. And we're going to see if the evidence is strong and compelling, and if Caleb Maupin is, on top of all of the other horrible things he is, also a sexual abuser. Now, this Medium article, thank fucking God, has TTS reading capabilities, because as all of you know, I am American, thus I have NA education and cannot read very well. So I'm going to go ahead and let the robot voice do it, and it is not because I'm lazy and do not want to read. I simply can't. It's not possible as an American. I cannot do it. So yeah, here we go. These are the sections of this that we're going to be taking a look at here. The robot guy is going to basically explain everything to us, and I will pause it when it needs to be and, give my input. But it's going to be very nice. It'll be like I'm reading it, only it'll be a robot man reading it instead. And he won't fuck up. Contents. Summary and information for the reader is the first section. The second section is Caleb Maupin's sexual misconduct, and that's broken up into two subsections, you see. Two members accuse him of sexual misconduct, member 1 and member 2. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to be hearing both their statements. The next broader section is Caleb Maupin's general abusive and exploitative behavior, which is broken up into 4 subcategories. The first being Keaton Mansfield's statement, the third being Joey Shantz's or Yankee Tanky's statement, the third being DL's statement, and the fourth being Madeline's statement. So we'll be listening to all of these. The fourth one is corroboration from other members, and that's broken up into 3 extra segments. We're going to go ahead and listen to the whole thing, And yeah, I will give my input where it seems most necessary. Let's go! There's not really anything on the screen to see, but when an image that is relevant is brought up, like, right now it's just text, but when an image that is relevant is brought up, I will show it and we'll discuss it. So let's start.
Summary and information for the reader. Bringing forward this statement was not easy for any of us, but there was no alternative to speaking the truth. It's our responsibility to stop abuse of power against comrades. Those of us who want to fight for the ideas of constructive, optimistic socialism and anti-imperialism and who have contributed to the organization's Center of Political Innovation have been betrayed by Caleb Maupin. Over the years he has subjected members of CPI to various forms of abuse and exploitation. He pushed his sexual desires on members who had considered him to be a leading comrade.
I believe CPI is the name of his little cult group, right? His little tanky political organization. He apparently makes them wear promise rings.
He brought his sexual impulses into political organizing. Caleb pushed a member out of CPI and its predecessor Students and Youth for a New America after she made clear that she would not do sexual favors for him. Caleb paid a member for sex who he knew was economically desperate, and then went on to push them out of the group and slander them. Caleb Maupin has also targeted people in their teens with manipulative cult tactics in an effort to exploit their labor so that he can build himself up off their hard work and sacrifice, and then would go on to slander them behind their backs if they didn't do exactly what he wanted. The abuses Caleb Maupin committed could have also done tremendous damage to all of us by discrediting all who associated with our political position. Despite these revelations, now is not a time to despair.
He paid a hard-for-money member of his organization for sex and then kicked her out and shamed her to everybody else for it. That is some really that is tanky behavior. That is definitely tanky behavior. I believe it.
To despair. It's a time to fight even harder for an optimistic socialism and anti-imperialism. It's a difficult reality for many to face, but Caleb Maupin's primary concern has not been advancing the cause of anti-imperialism. His primary concern...
Hey, listen, guys. At least now we know Caleb Maupin's not a virgin, right? That was, for a long time, that was the only confirmed thing we could know. No, he's a virgin. Promise ring, yeah. He really is just... He really is the archetypal 40-year-old virgin, isn't he? He really, really is. Like, everything about him, from his appearance to the way he acts, to the way he carries himself, to how angry he gets at people on the internet. Like, he really does just give off, like, 40-year-old virgin vibes, doesn't he? He just seems like the kind of guy who he was definitely stuck... Okay. I've seen pictures of Caleb Maupin when he was younger. He got stuffed in many, many, many lockers, okay? It wasn't until he found his space in political organizing that he was able to get a bunch of other losers to count on him and then take advantage of them in order to, get ahead. It's the type, he's using his power that he has now to feel the type of power he probably didn't feel when he was younger. And he's a fucking loser. We've always known he was a loser, but this really just takes the cake, I think.
Concern has been self-gain at the expense of others. However, our goal is not to make an overly simplified picture of Caleb Maupin or to demonize him unjustly. Our statements give credit where it is due, but at the same time they demonstrate his abusive behavior very clearly. The following statements from CPI members will show in detail how all of this was the case. If you would like to get in contact, or if you have any questions, please direct them to centerforpoliticalinnovation@gmail.com. The two members who were victims of Caleb's sexual misconduct wrote their statements in pseudonyms to protect themselves from any retaliation or harassment. Please respect their privacy. If you have any evidence of Caleb's further abuse, please come forward. 2. Caleb Maupin's sexual misconduct. 2a. Member 2 statement. When I first met Caleb, I was 19 years old, living on my own for the first time, and paying my rent with my own paychecks while going to school full-time. I was in a very vulnerable place socially and financially. At the same time though, I considered myself to be more mature than my peers because of how independent I was compared to my other political science classmates and because I was one of the only communists. When I met him, a prominent YouTuber and accomplished journalist over a decade older than me who treated me like his intellectual equal, he made me feel intelligent and important, especially since he would frequently take me out to dinner where we discuss our political ambitions and the think tank he wanted me to help him build, the Center for Political Innovation. Beginning in 2019, we would have dinner together at least once a month, and sometimes during those dinners, he would bring up what I assumed at the time was his academic interest in corporal punishment, especially spanking. As time went on, we became closer and closer friends, which led to him confiding in me in 2020 during the beginning of the COVID pandemic that his academic special interest was, in fact, a sexual one. He even told me that he would engage other people in conversations about corporal punishment and spanking because it turned him on to do so. When we became closer friends in 2021, he finally admitted to me that he would masturbate to the thought of roping unsuspecting people, especially women, into these conversations about their experiences with being spanked and other forms of physical abuse.
This is really fucked up, but I'm trying so hard not to laugh at how pathetic that is. This man has admitted to masturbating to stories of women talking about being spanked. Oh my fucking god. That's all I needed to hear. That's all we needed, dude. That's all we needed. Oh my god. Go back to 10 minutes ago when I didn't know this. You guys have missed a lot. Those of you who just got back, Jesus. Okay.
Abuse. I tend to be a very open and sexually liberal person, so I don't really mind when my friends discuss their sex lives with me in a platonic way. As a matter of fact, I was honored that Caleb supposedly trusted me enough that he was willing to share that part of his life with me. However, I was still under the impression that he was interested in me as a platonic friend and comrade, nothing else. Which is why I continued to participate in CPI's conferences and events, including facilitating CPI's California conference for him in September 2021, which entailed Caleb and I traveling together and sharing a hotel room and transportation. Back then, I was working for a
Oh no. I already know what's gonna happen. Second I heard required us to share a hotel, I already know where this is going. Oh fuck.
a math tutoring company. Caleb knew that this job was incredibly important to me, and that I needed the income to pay off my student loans and other financial expenses. I only agreed to go to California with Caleb under the condition that I would be able to work on the Monday we left because I had already been assigned a shift that day. When I first asked him, he told me that wouldn't be an issue because the conference was from Friday to Sunday, so that Monday I could work after we checked out of the hotel. Nonetheless, when Monday rolled around, Caleb insisted that he wanted to have lunch at a Mexican restaurant before we left and refused to get me a separate Uber to get to the airport early to work. Since I couldn't complete my shift in the restaurant, I ended up missing it and losing my job as a result. Even though I told him this is exactly what would happen and explained to him the many reasons why I couldn't afford to lose my job, when I did get fired, Caleb insisted that I will be okay and that we, himself and CPI, will not abandon you. Little did I know that when Caleb reassured me he'd help me find another job, he didn't necessarily mean another tutoring gig.
He made her, or made them, reliant on him. That's what he did. Financially and emotionally, you know? They lost their job, and so now, oh, you've got me and this entire organization now backing you up. But that also implicitly means I'm all you got now. I'm your only option you have. That's basically what the implication is, right? At least that's what I'm getting.
Gig. The main conflict between Caleb and I that arose after I lost my job was this. I'd started living in Jersey City with the John Brown Volunteers in August 2021, so I had been paying $200 per week in rent to Caleb to cover my portion of the $600 per week hotel cost. Before I moved in, Caleb had been paying the exact same hotel rate for only Joey and Keaton to live there, but he told me I had to pay a third of the rent when I moved in because he was supposedly paying the rest of all of our expenses. Despite this agreement, I was paying the majority of the household expenses for the John Brown Volunteers because the only money we received to support ourselves was the half of our canvassing money we kept each day. Most of the time, we'd make about $30 $100 per day total. So when I lost my math tutoring job, Caleb still expected me to continue financially supporting the JBV while I also had to continue to pay for my student loans, which meant I desperately needed another source of income.
Guys, I talked about this with the Black Hammer House story. I talked about this when the story about the Black Hammer House came out. The left is filled with people who are vulnerable and, frankly, easy to exploit. And there are exploiters out there. Caleb Maupin was one of them. There are a lot of abusers who get by on the left completely unscathed because they use progressive messaging, whether it be they're a tanky who uses communism as their shield, or a Nazbul who uses like super anti establishment politics or populism as a shield, or hell, even a woke scold who uses like their identity or their even just being in favor of a certain identity as their shield for their against criticism for their abusive behavior. There are people who do this, This is not going to be the last time, and it's not the first. My nose do be itching though. CPI had Black Hammer members show up at their event in support of Ghazi Kodzo. Oh, of course. There is a lot of crossover in the people who believe this kind of stuff. Of course. Much like there's a lot of crossover between these people and Nazis. Who would have thought? They act the same, they believe a lot of the same shit.
Income. Caleb expected me to spend even more time canvassing for the JBVs after I lost my job though, because he thought canvassing was a sufficient way of making money for myself and the organization.
I could have canvassed less so I could get another job, or he could have stopped asking me to pay the third of the rent since it seemed
Well, just change the robot man's voice out of nowhere. I don't know why that happened.
unnecessary before I'd started living there.
But part of what Caleb wanted was for me to spend less time away from him and CPI, giving basically every spare second I had to being a dutiful member of the group. The day after I lost my job at the math tutoring company, I told Caleb I wanted to try to at least find other part-time work. However, his reaction to that suggestion made it very clear that he didn't even see it as an option. He told me that I couldn't have one foot in living biologically and one foot in the revolution. This quote, which was part of a much longer lecture he gave about how I needed to devote even more time to our political work if I truly considered myself serious about it, was very hurtful considering I had just given up my job for Caleb and his organization. Yet, just treating the Center for Political Innovation as the main aspect of my life wasn't enough for him. Caleb made it clear that if I really cared about him and my other comrades, CPI would have to become my life. Therefore, I ended up doing sex work so I could make enough to support our household and pay off my debts.
So we can see we've got a screenshot here of the conversation. Member 2, we should talk later, but basically it all goes down to this. You are in a situation where you know your housing and food will be taken care of. You will not, this is Caleb Maupin, you will not be left out to dry. However, you have some rather unrealistic expectations about other stuff you insist is absolutely need. Your life is your life. Your decisions are your decisions, but you need to figure out how dedicated you are to communism, and if you're ready to leave your old life behind or not. Literal oh my god, this is like the kind of shit that, like, this is just full-on cult. Full-on cult. Just without even... I've been saying it for a while, guys. I've been saying it for a while. You have 1 foot in living biologically and 1 foot in the revolution, and that's a very hard way to live. I can help you and be your friend, but I cannot solve all your problems. What? God damn it. But I cannot solve all your problems. I cannot make hard choices for you. Do not suppose that I come to bring peace to... Okay, don't cite leftist scripture at me, motherfucker. Bring the jacket. See you at Wendy's at 1 p.m. I spent a long time thinking about you last night. I know these are very hard times for you. That's him saying that he jacked off. Sorry, I'm probably overthinking all this. I just care about you a lot. Spent a long time in prayer. Talk to you soon. Oh yeah, I forgot. That's the Bible? Ah, yes, I'm aware. That's why I said scripture, my friend. I do understand what you're saying, although, with all due respect, I think there are certain issues you've had the privilege of not having to deal with, and those pressures are something I'm more than happy to take care of on my own. The reality of it is that I can't just abandon my family. I don't have the privilege of doing that, because I've been their rock for my entire life, and they can't do certain things without me. I know it's probably difficult to deal with me having these other obligations, but they are obligations, not choices. There are certain things in my life that aren't optional, and I'm sorry that they interfere with my communist activism. If I had the option of forgetting them or leaving them behind, trust me, I would. It would certainly make my life a whole lot easier. I'm not asking you to abandon your family. We can talk later. There are some things I cannot offer you. I understand. We'll talk later. Interesting exchange. Yes, it definitely looks culty, to say the least.
While still having enough time to canvass full-time for the JBVs, I distinctly remember telling Caleb that it seemed like sex work was my only way out of this delicate financial situation. His response was simply that he respects my decision. In retrospect, it seems like the real...
Alright, guys. Mini-based rant segment, okay? The discussion around sex work and like whether or not it is a good thing, quote unquote, is like really, really muddled and a lot of really complicated discussion. And what I've seen is a lot of people who are not sex workers like to throw their hat into the ring on this discussion. But if you leave the conversation really just up to sex workers to talk about, they usually have the take of getting into sex work is not a game. It is not like a silly little fun decision that you just make on a whim. If you start doing sex work, especially if you're a woman online, you are making a massive decision. This will blacklist you from potential jobs in the future. People online might send that stuff to your family. There's just a lot of things that could happen that you might not consider if you get involved in sex work that can be a seriously big problem. And that's putting aside the stuff that happens. Like, it is a serious decision. And you get a lot of people who are not sex workers on the left who talk about it as though it's not a big deal or not a big decision, when realistically it is. There are young girls out there who have unironically had their lives ruined because they saw a celebrity they look up to make an OnlyFans account, and they're like 19, 20 or something. They make one too, and they don't really realize the implications of what they've done. It's a big deal. It's not that what they tell you when you're a kid, that everything you upload on the internet stays there forever, is real. It really is real. And I'm not saying this, like, obviously you guys know I'm pro sex work. I'm not anti-sex. Well, I'm pro sex worker, right? You guys know I'm not anti-sex worker. I'm not a swerf, right? But there are very, very serious things to consider when it comes to sex work. And these are things that cannot be glossed over, right? They need to be talked about. It's serious. It's like a really, like making an OnlyFans account isn't like a haha man. Why you gotta do it? It's like, if you're like out there and you're considering that, know that if you make that decision and there are naked pictures of you up on the internet, that's something you won't be able to escape. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing or a thing you should feel ashamed of. You shouldn't. It's not something to feel ashamed of. However, objectively speaking, you will be blacklisted from jobs. I believe there are even places that won't rent to you. I don't know if that's still the case, but I think that might be the case. I heard someone say that. A lot of stuff can happen. So consider that. Anyway, let's continue.
In retrospect, it seems like the real reason he didn't mind me doing sex work while I was living in CPI's New Jersey housing is because he probably wanted to become one of my clients. For what it's worth, after I left the JBV house, he eventually did become a client of mine. Caleb kicked me out of the John Brown Volunteers in the beginning of November 2021 after I relapsed on heroin in late October. At that point I took some time away from the organization, only attended a few smaller events, and stayed at my fiance's apartment to focus on my recovery and getting clean.
Wait, okay. Obviously the rest of the stuff isn't acceptable, but like, I'm sorry, you're relapsing on a heroin addiction is a pretty big deal. I don't necessarily fault Maupin for that. Like, kicking this person out after they relapsed on a heroin addiction, if they're sharing a living space with people in the organization and stuff, like, that's understandable. You can't have a heroin addict living in your organization's house if it's not something everyone there is okay with. Like, we're not like hate on drug addicts here, but let's be realistic. That's not something most people should have to live with.
Clean again. While by that time I had started my own math tutoring business and had my own students, I was still doing sex work as a side hustle to supplement my income because I didn't have enough students to cover the revenue I'd lost once I stopped canvassing entirely and had to pay my own utilities again. In December 2021, Caleb asked me to replace his former dominatrix, Miss Lucy. I agreed to do so.
I'm just I'm just processing how right every assumption I made about this man was. Like, I had so many assumptions that were unproven and unsubstantiated in my head about this man, and they're just getting proven correct in real time. And I'm remembering this moment. I'm savoring the moment. I'm savoring the moment. Let me savor it for another moment. All right, it's savored. I've savored the moment. I think we can continue. I think I've fully savored that moment. Let's hear it again.
In December 2021, Caleb asked me to replace his former dominatrix, Miss Lucy. I agreed to do so, for
Let's
$250 per
go.
session, because I
Elaborate.
did need the money,
Details.
and it felt like if I said no, I'd be even more isolated from the rest of CPI than I already was as a result of my relapse. By that time, in mid-December, I was clean again, which Caleb insisted upon in order for us to see each other, yet he was still apparently lying to the rest of CPI that I continued to be in the midst of my drug addiction. He did this while saying to my face that he didn't want me going to CPI events or his birthday party so I didn't run into his wife, Meshes, because he thought it would make things awkward.
I later learned from other CP
And he's a fucking Christian adulterer too. Let's fucking go! Literally citing scripture to this person while cheating on his wife. Oh. It's let's go! Let's go! She allows him to do it? Does she? Is his wife a cuck? It's okay to kink shame bad people, right? I don't want to be wrong. It's okay to do anything to bad people, okay? Ontologically evil, remember, guys.
Other CPI members that this was a common tactic of his, isolating someone from the group through rumors and hearsay, in order to make sure I didn't interact with other
That was a meme. Don't take that seriously.
CPI members in case I decided to tell them about our arrangement.
Truth be told, I was terribly afraid of anyone else in the organization finding out I was doing this with him. I was afraid if I told anyone, they wouldn't believe me, and if he told someone, I'd be shunned and ostracized.
I saw Caleb as his dominant a few times in December 2021. He essentially paid me to reenact his childhood corporal punishment as a fatherly figure to discipline him.
This is a very serious revelation. Now, putting aside the very strong first instinct to laugh at the idea of Caleb Maupin being spanked by a dominatrix, reenacting his dad spanking him as a child. Now, initially, that may sound hilarious. However, when you start to consider where that's probably coming from, you know how I said literally right before the stream, Caleb Maupin was the type of person who was a victim of bullying and abuse when he was younger, and now that he's found a place where he can manipulate a bunch of losers and do the same thing to them for his own gain. Like, you remember when I said that just earlier in the stream? That was true. More true than I could have even known when I said it a few moments ago, it seems. That's something I think it's a little iffy to make fun of. I'll admit my instinct was to laugh. I held it in because that's seemingly, I don't know if we should be making fun of a child, because like Caleb Maupin was a child who was presumably, by the looks of how it wound up, probably sexually abused, and a child being sexually abused is not funny. Even if that child is Caleb Maupin, it's not funny. It's when you realize that's where it's coming from, it stops being funny. So yeah, let's continue.
Him.
Included in this arrangement was the understanding that he'd also compensate me for the several hours he spent sexting me about his kink when we weren't seeing each other in person. He texted me so often, I eventually had to ask him to stop because I kept getting notifications from his sexually explicit messages while I was teaching my students. However, he only paid me for our in-person meetings and never even mentioned billing for my texting labor again despite the first agreement. After a couple of months of constant communication and a few punishment sessions, he abruptly stopped speaking to me, acting as if I suddenly didn't exist. I was very confused and hurt by this, because I truly thought that by agreeing to do sex work for him, I had won his good graces so we could continue to be friends.
I knew he didn't want me in the group afterwards, but I thought at the time that he at least appreciated my contributions thus far and respected me as a person.
Unfortunately, I was wrong. The reason he stopped speaking to me was because apparently another group member came forward with her own allegations against him, and he assumed that I was the one who'd leaked it.
Ooh. Well, first, let's go ahead and take a look at that last screenshot. I'll read it out. Can I? Okay, yeah, it's very tiny text. It'll be difficult. Think you can hold me accountable for my feelings about that book? Absolutely. Will moderate your attention. Okay, so this is Caleb. Think you can hold me accountable for my feelings about that book? This is them responding. Absolutely. Will moderate your detention assignment. You have to write, I must accept my punishment. I need your discipline to grow and be safe. 100 times. Oh no, this is their sexting. I didn't even realize that's what this was. This is them sexting. Okay, what kind of voice do I have to do for reading these sexting texts out? I'm about to read Caleb Maupin engaging in texting sub-dom roleplay right now, and Caleb Maupin is the sub. That's what I'm about to read. Are you guys ready? Hold on to something. Can you guys guess which one is the Caleb Maupin voice? Think you can hold me accountable? Wait, hold on.
Think you can hold me accountable for my feelings about that book?
Absolutely. Will moderate your detention assignment. You have to write, I must accept my punishment. I need your discipline to grow and be safe 100 times. That's what you are going to say to me when I ask, why are you being punished, Caleb? If you get that answer wrong, then you clearly haven't learned that lesson, and you'll be punished even more.
Thank you, Member 2. Can you remind me why the boatmaster needed to spank the last duck every day?
I have no idea what the fuck this is about. To keep him from getting lost and hurting himself. The one time he decides to avoid his punishment, he's isolated from his family and almost killed. If the boat... Is he the boatmaster? What the fuck is... I'm so goddamn confused about this. This is... Oh my god. I am cringing. I am fucking cringing right now. Oh... Okay. If the boatmaster doesn't spank the duck... Okay, wait, I think the dominatrix here is the boatmaster and Caleb Maupin is the duck. Oh my god, we have to Photoshop a duck bill on Caleb Maupin in the thumbnail. Oh my fucking god. Oh, oh god. If the boatmaster doesn't spank the duck will be like a sailboat without a rudder, directionless, alone, and with nowhere to go.
Love to keep from getting lost and hurting himself. The one time he decides to avoid the punishment, he is isolated from his family and almost killed. If the boatmaster doesn't spank the duck will be like the sailboat without a rudder, directionless, alone, and with nowhere to go. The boatmaster is keeping the ducks safe, encouraging them to hurry back. That hard spank with the stick was given in love. I'm sorry for questioning it, Member 2. I know I need to be punished.
I can't. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. If you can't tell, the nose I'm doing right now, the voice I'm doing with the nose pinched is Caleb Maupin. Oh my god.
That hard spank with a stick was given in love. I'm so sorry for questioning it, Member 2. I know I need to get punished. You must be very disappointed in me, Sadface. If you were my teacher, would I get sent for the paddle for this?
Yes, you would. Not because I'm angry with you, but because because I like Ping. You still haven't learned why you need an authority to guide you with a firm hand. You are smart enough to understand these things, so I have very high expectations of you. Those expectations help you become better, and my discipline helps you meet those expectations. Understood?
I need to get a spanking for my little attitude problem.
Oh my god, I'm just voice acting this shit. What am I? This is a long screenshot, chat. This is not, I'm not even halfway through. I'm not even halfway through. Bro. Bro. God help humanity.
I need a spanking for my little attitude problem. You should probably double the lines I need to write.
You'll be getting double the spankings instead. I'm a proponent of learning while doing. Maybe if you experience Ping's punishment for yourself, you'll lose your attitude.
Is it going to hurt to sit down after?
Yes, it will. But you'll still have to sit up straight and deal with the pain. Remember that pain every time you think of questioning my authority. If I see you slouching or changing your posture because you're in pain after I spank you, you'll just get paddled instead.
Disrespecting that book is kind of like disrespecting you. I must respect authority and discipline.
What, literal... Does this... Listen, I've been saying for a long time, tankies are bootlickers. Here he is saying it right here. It's all. Listen, I'll get into. I'll get into it in a minute. Let's just continue. Good posture is essential to good health and productivity. Exactly. Disrespecting any form of authority and discipline is disrespecting me, and I'm not forgiving of or kind when I am disrespected. Oh no, I've already... The start of this next one from Caleb, oh god. Oh, oh god. Oh jeez. Oh. Why is it so bad? Oh god. Oh god. Okay. I have to prepare for this one. Oh. There is no God, chat. We should all fear death. There's no God, there's no afterlife, there is no eternal reward awaiting for us when we die. Cling on to the fleeting moments of existence our consciousnesses get to have for as long as you can, because there is no way a God or a heaven exists in a world like this. Here we go.
My dad should have put me over his knee more often, taught me not to leave this disrespectful attitude. You should spank me really hard. Am I going to have to eat soap? Loved exactly. Disrespecting any form of authority and discipline is disrespecting me, and I am not forgiving.
Oh, he's just complimenting what they said before. Okay. Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay. Putting aside the weapons grade cringe there, is it not interesting how often, I've brought up many times that Nazis have, like, really weird virgin sex kinks having to do with race, and, that a lot of, like, racism, transphobia, sexism, homophobia, everything like that really comes from weird, repressed sexual desire and kinks and stuff like that. Almost always, it's coming from weird, repressed sexual shit. And, well, don't you just love getting proven right? Don't you just love getting proven right? You should show chat the baby duck. I'm not showing that to chat. It'll have to wait for the thumbnail of the video, don't worry. Okay, we're continuing.
Unfortunately, I was wrong. The reason he stopped speaking to me was because apparently another group member came forward with her own allegations against him, and he assumed that I was the one who'd leaked it. Even though he'd already told other CPI members that I was a drug addict who couldn't participate in group events before this, after member 1 came forward, he began telling people I was dangerous and two-faced, so that no one would believe the allegations. Of course, from my perspective, I had done everything he'd asked me to do and kept our secret to protect myself, so when he ghosted me suddenly in the middle of January, I felt completely betrayed. Nonetheless, I still publicly supported Caleb and CPI. To this day, I haven't said a single disparaging thing about Caleb in public. To the contrary, throughout these past few years I often defended Caleb against online attacks on his character, even if they came from other principled communists. The last straw for me, what finally forced me to stop publicly aligning myself with Caleb once and for all, was his response to Yankee Tanky's, aka Joey's, video exposing another CPI member, Keaton's, inappropriate behaviors within the group. Caleb sent me the link to that video, after weeks of completely ignoring me, in the hopes that I would ask Joey to take the video down since many of the allegations against Keaton included intimate details of my personal life. And while I did agree with Caleb that Joey had no right to expose my personal life like that without my consent, he did keep me anonymous while discussing what happened, and I myself had complained to Caleb about many of Keaton's actions as they were happening while we were still living in the JBV house, but Caleb's response was always to dismiss my concerns or reassure me he'd talk to Keaton. When I reminded Caleb about the truth of what Joey was saying and how I'd made these complaints to Caleb myself, he lashed out at me, accusing me of being obsessed with Keaton and demanding to know why I was so preoccupied with a former fling from last summer. This temper tantrum of his, and the subsequent attacks on my character throughout that conversation, was when I decided enough was enough. Clearly, my dedication to socialism and CPI throughout the years and loyalty to Caleb was no longer relevant. These incidents, as well as some conversations I had later with other former members of CPI, have me fully convinced that Caleb Maupin is not qualified to lead any political organization, period. If he could callously abuse, manipulate, disregard, and shun a determined group member and close friend after almost half a decade of loyal service, there's no telling what else he's capable of. 2B.
Jesus.
Member 1 statement. As I originally...
So now we're starting with member 1. I don't know why that was member 2. They start with member 2, and now we're starting with member 1. Maybe I don't know what the naming scheme is here, but I assure you that it makes sense in some way. Not qualified. What a surprise! Listen, okay. So all right, let me be clear and say there are a lot of people out there who are like Caleb Maupin, who will use their ideology and their beliefs to draw on people who agree, who are vulnerable, who have nowhere else to go, and will use them in order to get ahead. It's common. And on the left, those people typically use their ideology and what they stand for as a shield. That is something Caleb Maupin has done continuously. And at the end of the day, when you look into these people, it is always the same thing. Caleb Maupin is, well, he's a boot-licking tanky, right? And, you know, I like to make jokes about how tankies need, like, a daddy to have, like, a daddy's boot to lick, you know? I make that joke literally on my stream, that they're obsessed with having, like, a large machismo embodying leader to look up to. They don't actually believe in socialism or communism. They actually believe in the idea of a dictatorship that has communist aesthetics. And it's all about having somebody to tell them what to do. And it really is funny when it ends up coming from a weird sexually repressed place, doesn't it? Zan, want a joint? No, I don't need a joint. I got my carts. I don't smoke weed. I vape it. I either use a dry herb vape or I hit the concentrate carts. I prefer the concentrate carts for like my general everyday usage. But if I could, I would definitely be getting a grinder and using a nice dry herb vape, because I do love how that feels. It's always the best way to smoke it. Or vape it, I guess. Anyway, moving on to member 1's statement.
Member 1 statement. As I originally intended to keep this information to myself for the rest of my life, I would like to ensure that my right to privacy is respected. Knowing Caleb's behavior towards the youth has only deteriorated over the years, I feel the need to share my story in order to provide insight into how these issues with Caleb have evolved over time. In September 2017, I was a 22-year-old woman who found out about Cinna through a mutual friend who was also engaged in political activism. My personal interest in foreign relations/history led me to join a group that prides itself on intellectual discourse and on educating ourselves/others about the human rights we deserve.
I felt so engaged that I even included Cinna on my resume, listing that I helped with organizing events related to labor history, workers' rights, and that some of our members did food drives and laundry drives.
we all noticed that Caleb was an unofficial leader of the group. He was 29 at the time, had a consistent income, and was willing to spend his income on event space, whereas we were younger and without the ability to spend much of our incomes on event space and organizing. Caleb was Cinna's de facto leader, and all decisions would need his approval. Anyone who made their own decisions regarding activism without his knowledge or approval could face his judgment, criticism, and gossip. When I got a new side job that involved teaching in 2018, Caleb began to mention his rough childhood to me more often. During one-on-one conversations, he would mention different stories all tying back to these main points. He always found it hard to make friends.
What is Caleb Maupin's thing with teachers? They're both teachers? I mean, no hate, I guess. But if I had a nickel for every time Caleb Maupin thirsted after a teacher, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice.
He was bullied badly, and he was physically abused growing up. Caleb spoke more often about being spanked at school, and then finally made it clear that he gets sexual gratification from being spanked now as an adult.
I literally started this segment by saying Caleb Maupin was the type of dude who got bullied relentlessly at school. Okay. Zan, you famously love MILFs, as I absolutely love MILFs. I like dominating MILFs, though. Not being dominated by MILFs. That is what makes me and Caleb Maupin different. You and me are not the same.
An adult, and sees a dominatrix twice a month with his wife's permission. I thought it was kind of strange that Caleb was telling me all.
Okay, I guess his wife is a cuck. Alright then, I guess he's an adulterer, but an adulterer with permission. I wonder if that's how God sees it, you know? I wonder if that's how God likes it in the Bible. I wonder how he would feel about that. Jesus? Yo, JC. Maupin is cheating on his wife, but she's cool with it. Yeah, it's still adultery. That's still a sin. Alright. Yeah. Jesus Christ can talk to you through your head, apparently, according to Christians, so he just told me that it's still a sin. And you can't prove me wrong that I wasn't. You can't say I wasn't just talking to Jesus. No Christian can disprove that. Would you question that Jesus has the power to speak to me? That's always the game that I like to play with Christians sometimes. It pisses them off. But let's continue.
All this, but I figured he was trying to be friendly and jovial, the way some friends do talk about sex. Plus he had mentioned how much of a struggle it always was for him to make friends. It was weird to me because I thought our political/professional friendship in Cinna was fine the way that it was. I kept defaulting to having empathy for his rough situation and his self-proclaimed social awkwardness. Another thing that Caleb mentioned to me at some point in 2018 was that he would ask women if they were ever spanked as a child, and like to talk to women about their experiences and share his own childhood spanking memories. Caleb told me that he knows this is bad, but he would take what they shared with him and masturbate about them being spanked. Not them being spanked as a child, but he would just masturbate to the whole idea of them expressing their feelings on being spanked and punished. I was really shocked and disgusted that he had told me this. I was still an active Cinna member attending and organizing events. I never knew how to ask him to stop bringing up his fetish without there being any consequences. Also, I wanted to maintain empathy for him constantly bashing himself for being socially awkward. Additionally, everyone in Cinna who knew Caleb knows that he creates gossip between comrades, and will privately tell one comrade a lot of nasty and untrue things about another. With the way he made this gossip and wanted everything centered around his input/approval, we hardly ever spoke to each other outside of Caleb's earshot. We certainly didn't dislike each other, but he would tell us generally unsavory things about each other that we would shrug off. For example, he would tell us that one Cinna member is very spoiled, and is supposedly a whiny baby that lives off money from their parents. This was an 18 to 20-year-old member at the time. Then there were 2 other members where Caleb's negative gossip on them to me.
Yeah, no shit, an 18-year-old to 20-year-old might be living off of money from their parents. What? Bizarre, okay.
To me was asking me if I think they're gay on multiple occasions, and Caleb would specifically point out the things about what they do or what they wear that make them seem gay.
Hey, remember when Caleb Maupin got really, really offended and angry when I reviewed his burn book and said, oh yeah, Caleb Maupin is a reactionary, by the way. He is homophobic and transphobic and all of that. And he got super offended about it and said, no, I'm not, no, I'm not, no, I'm not. Yeah. Listen, tankies, Nazis, Nazbuls, all that shit. It's like a Venn diagram with a lot more crossover than you'd think.
So, these were not inherently bad traits at all about these people, but we just all had this mutual understanding that speaking to each other or doing things without Caleb is a waste of time since he planted negative ideas about us in each other's heads, and we can't really make any group decisions without him anyways. So, this contributed to my fear of ever telling him to knock off the sexual conversations and sexual oversharing.
I didn't want to get kicked out or have any drama created about me to tarnish my image, the way I would see him constantly complain about other members to me.
At that point, Caleb would say I was very special and trustworthy and hardworking, and the other Cine members were supposedly not as hardworking or present as I was. Between February 2019 and April 2019, Caleb began mentioning the idea of a social media coach. Caleb started to increase how often he would bring up the social media coach idea. He wanted to find a woman who would text him throughout the week to check in on him and make sure to shame and admonish him if he wasn't reaching his goals and growing his following online. Then, the social media coach would meet up with him and spank his rear end at the end of the week, which he would pay for. I kept once.
This man is different. That's all I can say. This man is different.
Then, the social media coach would meet up with him and spank his rear end at the end of the week, which he would pay for. I kept once again trying to do deflecting measures, like I would tell him to check out an app called Seeking Arrangements, where he can create a profile and find someone to charter up this sexual/financial agreement with.
I wasn't exactly uncomfortable yet because I knew I could always reject any advance, but it was also honestly starting to get annoying, and if he wanted his fix so bad he needed to just go somewhere and find it and stop talking to me about it all the time, considering the fact that I was a member of Cine and therefore first and foremost a comrade/activist.
Again, Caleb was simultaneously telling me I was such a kind and special friend, and such a hardworking Cine member.
I felt empathy for how he said he felt like an outcast growing up.
Correct me if I'm wrong, isn't that called love bombing? Isn't that an abuser tactic called love bombing? Like, where you just, like, in one case, you just drop a whole bunch of compliments and a whole bunch of fawning and whatnot on somebody, and then the next moment, or most of the time, you're just indifferent or rude towards them. So he's doing, yeah. Standard tactic of cults to lure you in too. Yeah, obviously Caleb Maupin has a cult, and I'll get a little bit into that soon. Especially his little like promise rings he made the cult members wear. That shit is interesting. That's a little interesting, to say the least.
Up, how I'm finally a great friend he has that he trusts, and also how disappointed he is in the other Cine members compared to myself.
I was worried if I clearly told him to stop talking about sexual fantasies and him needing prostitutes, I wouldn't be able to be in Cine anymore, or have a working friendship with him anymore. Something clicked in my head on April 17, 2019, when he wrote in a message that he will get in touch with his old roommate about this social media coach idea. He said he would talk about this idea to the roommate, and see if she is interested in being his social media coach.
Oh boy. All right, let's read these messages. I'm going to restart. So the top message from Caleb Maupin is cut off, but I'll start reading the first word that's legible. And I think you can probably figure out what came before it. Here we go. Yep. Zan VA is back.
Until it's red and bruised doesn't arouse you, so you won't do it with passion.
Right. And I know there are things too, like financial domination stuff, but yeah, I'm not passionate about it. So in the end, I felt like I would be wasting their time and money, and I would go through a lot of effort for something that makes me feel gross, because I had imagined most clients are not young or attractive.
My old roommate Blank, she seems interested in some of this. I'm going to casually bring up the social media discipline thing when I see her next week. Not directly ask her, but just casually bring it up. See how she reacts.
Yeah, nothing to lose, I guess. I can't do that for you, just so you know, only because you have mentioned it to me.
I wasn't propositioning you, don't worry. We're comrades. I don't bring this stuff into politics.
Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying? Oh my god. Stop fucking lying. All right.
A coach. My response to that information was to take my chance and finally make it clear that I will never be interested in engaging in acts of prostitution for Caleb. To me, I believe that he was hoping I would do exactly what he had hoped would happen with his old roommate. He was talking about this idea to me often, the way he said he would talk about it to the old roommate, in the hopes that she responds to the idea in a positive way. This conversation on April 17, 2019 ended nicely, with him apologizing and complimenting me, complimenting my contributions to Cine and how well I carry myself in my day-to-day life, heavily complimenting my personal/financial/career successes. As a side note, I was doing very well for myself in 2019. I had a great job, I had a vibrant social life/hobbies, I worked very hard both at my regular job and in Cinna, and Caleb knew all of this and complimented me very often for it. This is important for me to mention, due to the way Caleb has chosen to slander my image/reputation to other comrades. This conversation on April 17, 2019 was the first and final time I had ever made it clear that I was uninterested in any prostitution and sexual involvement with Caleb. Our conversations between April 17 onwards then did focus more on politics, but he would still mention his sexual things to me, like messaging me on April 22, only mere days later, that he is getting ready to go meet his dominatrix to get spanked.
I ignored that comment and continued trying to keep our conversations intellectual, jovial, and respectful.
Around this same time, there were offers to go on an all-expenses-paid trip to Venezuela to promote friendship between America and Venezuela, and to protest against Juan Guaido's presidency, paid for by Venezuelan political groups. Though this sounded like an alluring offer since it was all expenses paid, the relations between America and Venezuela were particularly tense in April and May 2019, due to Juan Guaido's insertion as president of Venezuela. At that time, Venezuelan officials made threats to shut off power at the U.S. Embassy, and American officials began plans to pull diplomats out of Venezuela. I didn't see why I should be pressured to take this free trip to Venezuela, to protest against Guaido, therefore, protesting against America, and risk consequences during my time there or upon my return to America. This idea seemed very risky and out of touch for Caleb to be suggesting. Usually, our activism was within NYC/America. We were students and youth for a new America, and Caleb was usually the first person to speak up loudly about us making sure we behave cordial and safe outside/online, for example, making sure that we never talk about guns or promoting violence, and just always trying to make sure that we only promote safe and legal forms of freedom of speech. So, this seemed very out of character that Caleb felt insistent that I needed to drop my work and take a trip to Venezuela to condemn America, and that I shouldn't care about any repercussions this could have upon my return back to America.
By the way, I've been told that Caleb Maupin at one point, like over half a decade ago, used to be fairly well respected. Was he always like this, chat? Was he always... Well, obviously he was always like this, but was he always, with his politics, like, was he always a crazy tanky type, or was there a time when he was more, you know, not crazy? I don't know. Basically, what he said was, don't Fed post, but be sure to let every one of your fellow female members know how hard you like to be spanked and spit on. Jesus. He became famous during the Occupy Wall Street protests. Didn't Vosh ask about how he once joined a leftist org that turned out to be a cult? Why does this keep happening? Oh, it's easy. Because people on the left are very, very married to their ideology. A lot of them are extremely morally lucky and lucked out into falling into being a progressive, or even a leftist. Or they feel like they discovered it themselves once they got to college or outside of their parents' home, and they feel like, you know, they found the real way. And so some charismatic, or just somebody who seems like they know what they're talking about, person can come along and take advantage of their naivete, and you know, usually it's like an older guy or whatever, and they just take advantage of these young people. Usually it's young, financially unsuccessful, perhaps even like LGBT people who have nowhere else to go. And those are the people on the left who are perfectly vulnerable for bringing into a cult like this. It's really, really sad, but it's common. This is not a one-time thing. It's happened before, and it'll happen again.
America. Caleb's insistence that I go to Venezuela to condemn America came to a head on May 1, 2019, where at 1 a.m. he sent me a message asking me why I and other Cinna members don't have as much drive as him. He explained that he is so accomplished and has done so many risky political acts throughout his life, and now he has a comfortable job, which is why he couldn't go to Venezuela, but it was really disappointing that none of us would go to Venezuela. In my head, this was such a joke. He stated that he can't go to Venezuela because he currently has a comfortable job, and he wants us to all drop whatever we're doing and go there in such a tense political climate during May 2019. I told him that I had to wake up early in the morning for work, and that he needs to leave me alone. If anyone knows Caleb, you know that he is extremely persistent, pushy, wants to isolate you, and he wants you to take huge risks with your employment/family relationships to show your devotion and commitment to his group, and that he sends text message essays about why you're wrong and bad.
All right, let's read these. Zan VA is back.
And write articles and travel the world and be a big communist revolutionary leader, and the whole world has done everything to block me from doing that. I sold my blood plasma. I got mistreated for years in WWP, and now I have a nice, comfortable job. I'm well known, quote unquote, comparatively speaking. I don't get it. Here I'm practically begging people to do what I have thought to do my whole life. The door is wide open, and people don't want it. Here,
Oh, wait. What?
why did I have to fight so hard to do what other people don't even care enough to do?
My deepest apologies. I can't speak for others and have already explained I care about my personal safety.
It's not an issue of apologizing. You did not do anything wrong. You just aren't like me.
I know I didn't do anything wrong. Okay, then?
Where are people like me?
That's what he ended it with. Where are people like me? Your nose is getting red from pinching it. I know, and my nose is sensitive. I'm sorry. Like, what do you want? I'm fucking. Do you want me to stop doing the voice? Do you not like it? It's accurate. It sounds like him. Maybe it needs to be a little nasalier, but if I could get a little more nasalier, it'll sound like him. No, keep doing it. Thank you.
Bad. 30 minutes after I told him to leave me alone and let me sleep, my phone started buzzing with his incoming texts, rapid fire. What ensued next was a 2-hour back and forth argument, where he tried out every manipulation tactic to try to tell me why I'm wrong for not going to Venezuela, and adding in new argument components, such as accusing me of being the one to have initiated this argument. He was clearly the one who initiated the argument, while I was the one asking him to stop and let me sleep for work in the morning, claiming that I did this to feel superior to him and because I supposedly thought he was a freak, because I'm a normie and I'm scared of the US Embassy in Venezuela closing, so I should never have gotten involved with Cinna in the first place, which to me was an immediate red flag about his isolating behavior. He should not want his members to ever feel unsafe or unprotected, yet
Yeah.
he keeps making people feel complimented for taking huge risks to their safety/employment/family relationships. I maintained my position during our entire argument. I wanted him to apologize for being disrespectful to me and for pressuring me to engage in a situation I felt unsafe about, that he himself was unwilling to do himself, because of his comfortable job. The 2-hour conversation kept going. Also at that point he owed me $157, which I had spotted him, because he was always running out of money. I didn't want to get blocked by him before getting my $157 back.
I also was nervous to silence or turn off my phone, because of how dramatically he twists stories about people.
I felt like
No, dog, I've cut. I cannot imagine feeling like $157 is like worth continuing to deal with Caleb Maupin's bullshit. Holy shit. I'd cut off Caleb Maupin over much more. Jesus.
I wanted this argument to remain between only Caleb and I that evening, and to get resolved by us only ideally.
Like, imagine staying friendly with Caleb Maupin in hopes of him paying you back $157 before you block him. I mean, $157 is a lot of money, but at the same time, Caleb Maupin is a massive douche. So, I don't know.
Ideally, without him creating gossip and lies about me to other people over this. I was afraid if I truly did cut off our argument and go to sleep before getting him to stop on his own accord, I'd wake up in the morning to hundreds of messages or multiple people who had only heard Caleb's version of events asking me why I was so horrible to Caleb, and a whole new messy issue of new twisted gossip and drama. Our argument goes in circles, with me resisting all of his manipulation attempts and him baiting me to try to criticize him or call him names, until 3 a.m. After this May 1st argument, I shared a PDF file of the screenshots between Caleb and in the Cinna Facebook message group chat. The PDF file contained the entire 2-hour text argument, because I know Caleb creates drama and makes lies to suit himself, so I included the entire argument so that no one could ever accuse me of posting anything out of context. At the time when I shared the PDF in the Cinna chat, I told everyone that this is how Caleb speaks to me personally, and I really don't like being treated this way. At the time, no one had my back, no one cared to reach out, and Caleb kicked me out of the chat group and told me that sharing screenshots of our personal conversation was wrong to do, and he once again accused me of luring him into trusting me, and that I betrayed him by posting the PDF of the argument. Everyone in the chat was super confused about what the PDF even meant. They were right to be confused. It happened out of nowhere at 1 a.m. And even by showing all of the screenshots, it looked so weird why Caleb was doing this to me out of nowhere, being upset with me for not going to Venezuela in May 2019, when usually he had spoken very highly of me to other members and other members respected me as a Cinna group member. It was uncharacteristic for Caleb to be mad at me.
Again, why can't they kick this dude out of the group since he's the problem? I'm pretty sure he is the leader. He is a cult leader. The group they're in is his cult. He manipulated them and made them dependent on him. Not to mention, he gained a lot of traction in those places and in those spaces, which allowed him to have, like, the social pressure of, like, making those that might want to speak out against him scared. Yeah, CPI is owned by Caleb Maupin.
So, when I got no response from anyone in the Cinna group chat, this is when I realized that everyone in the group is currently in denial and is a victim themselves. I was removed from the Cine chats, and since Caleb was the ringleader of everything, it was impossible for me to ever be able to come to events or continue to help out like I used to. When I would get removed from chats, other members would try to add me back, but since Caleb was ignoring my presence, it felt useless/hopeless for me to go any further in Cine.
I feel like on April 17, 2019, when I shot down any notion of ever prostituting myself out for Caleb, I think he tried to act nice and normal for a bit, and then on May 1, 2019, created a strange argument over false pretenses to try to rile me up and get me pushed out. It turns out that after I got removed he still made up lies to discredit me. Other Cine members were confused why I wasn't in the group anymore. I was helpful and respected and everyone was happy to have my contributions and have me as a member. Caleb created disparaging remarks that I couldn't be part of Cine anymore and could no longer attend group Cine functions, because I was supposedly an alcoholic all of a sudden. This parallels the situation I mentioned before where Caleb would keep gossiping about if other Cine members were secretly gay based on what they wear, or how another member is spoiled. This is also why I mentioned earlier.
Secretly gay? Okay, so it was a full-on, like, no gays allowed organization? What? Wait. This man was, like, investigating whether or not his fucking cult members are gay while having a meltdown over me saying he's a homophobe in my video. Chat. I don't miss. I just don't. I just don't miss. I don't. I just click heads, and I never miss. Back to the lobby, Caleb Maupin. Back to the fucking lobby.
Earlier in this statement that in 2019 I had a great job, and how in our final argument, Caleb was the one who had still owed me $157. So, I found out in 2022 that Caleb told different Cine/CPI members different slanderous versions about me. He told some people that I quit Cine because I was an alcoholic. He told other people I couldn't keep up with Cine obligations anymore due to my alcoholism but that I'm welcome to come back. Established Cine members knew this was weird but didn't question it, and new Cine/CPI members didn't know who I was and didn't question it. For the record, I have never had a drinking problem. When I was 23 in 2019 I had fun drinking socially with my friends. Caleb has an alcohol allergy and cannot drink any alcohol, and in addition to his gossipy/judgmental lifestyle, I think he has a bad perception on what is or isn't a normal amount of alcohol to consume. I have never been a daily drinker. In 2019, I would probably average about 4 to 5 alcoholic drinks on a Friday/Saturday night if I went out with friends, and only in a scene where drinking is socially acceptable, like a bar/restaurant/music venue, and then about 2 to 3 drinks if I met a friend, such as Caleb, during the work week.
I stick to the general 1 drink per hour rule, and in general I intrinsically value sobriety and alcohol moderation.
Me, my family, and my closest people who know me would not at all characterize me as having an issue with alcoholism, let alone an alcoholism issue that would lead me to abandon my political activism. I am explaining this in such great detail because I and other Cine members 100% believe that this was a slanderous/libelous tactic to detract from the fact that I had turned down money for sex with him.
I think that Caleb has devoted far too much time to talking about his sexual life and gossiping about/slandering comrades.
To me, it's very concerning, and I was partly silent from 2019.
Dude, it is wild to me that somebody like Caleb Maupin can convince so many people that he's a normal guy. Like, I know how he did it, and it's not necessarily surprising to me necessarily, but it's still bewildering, you know? It's like when you see an anti-vax protest and you're like, Jesus. Like, you know how they became anti-vax, you know why, but at the same time, it's just, you still wonder, how the fuck can you be this stupid? How many babies dropped on heads? How many alcoholic and smoking mothers? How many... Jesus. He was never normal, Xanderhall? What the fuck are we talking about? I don't know. Like, people told me that Caleb Maupin was at one point, like, not a crazy, you know, Nosbel type. Somebody told me that.
From 2019 until now, because I was hoping that Caleb would just get the help that he needs. I have never wanted to cancel Caleb, or anyone. I always hoped Caleb would learn from his mistakes and improve himself without ever needing a public call-out to stop him from hurting any more young people. Unfortunately, as much as I had hoped Caleb would improve, I realized that he has only become much worse than he was to me in 2019. In March 2019, I noticed a newer member who was 19 years old began to get favored by Caleb, and something in my head started to feel worried that this innocent person might be getting asked questions about if they have ever been spanked. This member had vaguely mentioned stressful moments with their parents during group meetings, which scared me to wonder if this could have Caleb make that connect to his spanking/domination fetish, or that they might potentially get taken advantage of sexually by Caleb one day. This member I am speaking of is member 2. This member seemed so excited to be in Cine and to be Caleb's friend, and I really didn't know what to do. I was afraid of being accused of making false accusations/starting drama, if I were to preemptively...
So that the person who they were just talking about there was the original accuser that we just read before this one. Jesus. Whew.
To preemptively warn this member before anything bad actually ever happened. I ended up never warning this member, never speaking to this member one-on-one, and it wasn't until 2022 that I had found out the true extent of exploitation and prostitution that Caleb had put this young and innocent person through. Caleb ended up prostituting this person while they were homeless, and while Caleb told them repeatedly to not get a regular day job, Caleb told this person to not get a regular day job, because that isn't what committed revolutionaries do. However, Caleb had no problem with paying them for his sexual gratification. I live with that guilt. I can't believe I never warned that member back when I had the chance in 2019. I would have seemed crazy if I warned them. I urge all young members of CPI to question everything and everyone. Do your due diligence. Don't naively trust people just because they call themselves an activist or a comrade. Do not be afraid to question Caleb's credentials. Does Caleb have experience in accounting, nonprofit accounting, or positive youth development? Caleb keeps working around young people. Has he taken precautions to create strict boundaries with minors and young adults? Has he been formally trained in how to work with high school/college freshman-aged students? Does Caleb even see the value in taking a step back from CPI in order to learn more about how to teach youth appropriately and work on himself? This is an opportunity for people to prove if they are a true comrade or not. I was forced out of Cinna because I did not want to be Caleb's prostitute. I have provided the background and details, and I have allowed Cinna members to hold my phone and look through my messages with Caleb. Will you take the side of the predators who wish to silence me, who continue to further break the law by creating libel and slander about me, who wish to intimidate victims into silence? Or, will you actually be a comrade and support injustice everywhere, even if it gives you cognitive dissonance?
Well, there are some corroborating statements as well that back these up, that come along with this. I'm going to go ahead and drop the full thing in here, but that is about a third of the whole of the thing, but that's the biggest chunk of what's relevant. Here's the link to the Medium article, and it obviously has the voiced thing, so you can just skip to where we were if you want to listen to the whole thing yourself. I've skimmed over it already before I went live, so there's not too much more that's interesting in the rest of it. However, I think this is enough to basically make the point that I want to make, the main reason why I made this video, or why I'm doing this segment. And there are a lot of people out there who will fall into a political ideology not because they have a well-reasoned thought process that led them to believe that this ideology is what is most. I didn't read any of the text beforehand, so that was a bit of a shock though. Anyway, there are a lot of ideologies out there that a lot of people did not come to with a logical thought process. They were either morally lucky, they got kind of brainwashed or pressured into it, or they just kind of, they were taught it or just kind of naturally developed into it because of their upbringing, right? Maybe they just kind of have the same politics as their parents. That's usually most people. Most people are not hyper autistic, terminally online, political care frogs who want to, learn about all of these issues and have a nuanced understanding of them and be able to arrive at the best possible conclusion for every issue. That's not most people, right? Most people are pulled to their political ideologies by charismatic demagogues who do a really good job of wording their arguments in a good way, or maybe they're really good at strawmanning political opposition, or maybe they're just really good at framing their beliefs in an entertaining and funny way. There are many ways to convince people that you are correct that do not involve making correct arguments. And people like Caleb Maupin are exactly that. Caleb Maupin is exactly that. Caleb Maupin is the type of person who uses a weird niche political ideology that a lot of young high school to college age people will fall into, to basically brainwash them into believing not only is his political ideology the only way to, believe, the only belief system that is moral or good, but on top of that, to rely on him. Because at the center of his belief system is, of course, him, the activism that he leads, all the hard work that he's done, all the things that he says, all the things he stands for. He doesn't, at least to his members, the way he frames it, he doesn't consider himself a communist. He considers his followers to be Maupinist communists, I guess you could say. And he himself, it seems, just has a desire for some big leather-booted dictator to step on his throat or something. I really can't tell. Regardless, though, at the end of the day, Caleb Maupin is an abuser. One who's used his political station and his beliefs and what he, just the ideals that he supposedly stands for as a shield against criticism for a very long time. The things that these allegations exposed have frankly been evident for years. They've only just now been proven. And, it does kind of feel good to be right. I'll admit that. Anyway, if you enjoyed this segment, please consider leaving a like. It helps the channel and my video out a lot. It's not just a hollow show of support. And if you want to see more from me and for YouTube to actually tell you when I go live or upload a new video, you can also subscribe and ring the bell icon. YouTube will not do that otherwise. And of course, if you want to see more from me on the internet, you can follow all of my social media, which is linked down in the description below. And finally, if you want to support me financially and you've got the money for it, don't donate to me if you don't, of course, then you could support me financially by donating, gifting a sub, or just subscribing for yourself on my website, xanderhall.com/live. We always love a good little white name purge. There's a lot of white names in the chat tonight. And if you want to support me in any other way, you can also do so on YouTube, Twitch, Streamlabs, Stream Elements, and finally, Patreon. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it, and have a good one.